aftermath. Let's go to the beginning of this frigid tale.
Gary Dobbs is in 31 Storm Central to explain where the storm got its powerful punch.
Heather, Don, this storm came on the heels of some very warm weather. If you'll remember, the temperature, the high the day before the ice storm hit was 68 degrees. So a lot of folks across the valley a little bit skeptical when we were forecasting a significant icing event just around the corner. Well, what happened is a strong cold front moved into the Tennessee Valley. We'd been looking at this front for quite some time. It had a history of cold temperatures behind it. And since we've been watching it, we were worried that the moisture or the rainfall would linger once the cold air arrived. Well, that's exactly what happened. The coldest of the air was to the north and the west of Huntsville, and that's where the worst problems were located, especially in the shoals, which will be our first stop tonight.
All right, thanks, Gary. The storm dealt its most vicious blow, as Gary said, to the Shoals region.
People had to survive without power, phones, heat, and water. Shoals Bureau Chief Alicia Smith joins us from Hickory Hills Subdivision in Florence, a place full of survivors.
Survivors is the best description because we are surviving the worst natural ice disaster to ever strike this area. In the wake of this storm, it has left behind hundreds and thousands of downed trees as well as tree limbs like this one. And what everyone is doing right now is piling all of these trees into what we call mounds of mess, getting them out of the yards, on the curbside, and out of the streets. Last Thursday, a chain reaction started, and Sean, Bracy, and myself took cameras in hand and followed the storm from the moment it hit. The system hit with rain and sleet pellets. 2 inches of sleet covered roadways like Wilson Dam and Shoal Creek Bridge. The rain did not let up. Cox Creek Parkway turned to slush. From early morning through the day, freezing rain was sticking to traffic lights, antennas, power lines, everything except the pavement. Ice weighted down tree limbs. The limbs started falling. Other trees became so heavy their roots could not hold them up any longer.
It sounded like minor explosions every time one to break and then hit the ground. Everything it shook the whole house. You go run out and check, see what got damaged.
The trees crashed onto everything below, power lines, cars, and houses.
This is a disaster. According to my insurance company, it's going to be a catastrophe.
As power lines fell, electric blackouts started. Phone service stopped, and in many areas, water could not be pumped. A state of emergency declared in Lauderdale County. By 3 p.m. Thursday, Florence Mayor Eddie Frost asked everyone to leave the city. Trees were falling so fast, travel was life-threatening. When we made it home, we found houses darkened. We lit candles and did without modern conveniences and tried to stay warm. Friday morning, Northwest Alabama was devastated. Roads were blocked, the National Guard sent into action. The mission, clear the streets, help get the power restored. Saturday, Governor Folsom took to the air to see the catastrophe. In western Lauderdale County, the road to Waterloo shut off from the shoals, too many downed trees covering it. The entire city without power.
And some of the residential sections look like a combat zone.
Nightfall again. Blackouts continued. People lined up to get kerosene fuel for heat. Stores were already sold out of kerosene heaters and generators of all kinds. Electric crews faced rebuilding entire systems. Meanwhile, more than 80,000 people were without electricity. Every available power repair person jumped into action, repairing lines. Survival modes kicked in. Ice, which caused it all, now in high demand, as people tried to keep food from spoiling. Some people grilled out of doors. Those with power back on found friends and families piling in. People packed motels, and shelters opened at each volunteer fire department and many churches. Boy, we have all certainly been through an awful lot here in the Shoals area, something that all of us who have been through this in one form or another will never forget. You know, chainsaws are something else that people will not forget as we are in the recovery stage. I don't have a chainsaw, but I have a saw. And the sound of chainsaws are something that are, after the storm, that are just as memorable as the sound of all the snap, crackle, and popping of those trees falling. But can you imagine how long it would take to saw up all the debris? So it's a good thing that we have had chainsaws throughout this crisis. But Let's get to what's happening right now, current situation with this storm, and that is we have moved from an emergency status to a recovery stage, and that means that streets are clear and debris removal is in high gear. National Guard units are still helping out. Without the Guard manpower and equipment, it could have taken months to clear the streets and get the debris to disposal sites. Elsewhere, foresters are saying get ready for advice on planting new trees. In the meantime, as you have chainsaws out using them, try to trim only what's needed off of trees in hopes of many with damaged limbs can survive this mess. Many people are wondering about Miss UNA Jackie Rainwater. She was critically injured during the storm when a tree limb crashed onto her car. She is suffering from a broken neck and many other injuries. She remains in critical condition at Huntsville Hospital in the neurointensive care unit there. We do understand, talking about recovery from this ice storm and all of the mess, we do understand from family members that Miss UNA is also recovering slowly but surely, and her family and friends manning a vigil around the clock by her side at Huntsville Hospital there, Heather and Don.
Our prayers go out to them tonight. Alicia, you mentioned at one time 80,000 people were without power. How about tonight?
Here in Lauderdale County tonight, approximately 8,000 people still without power, and several hundreds more in Colbert and Franklin County also without power. Everyone's been waiting for those electric crews to pull up in their neighborhood and be sure that those men and women are out working around the clock to get power back on at your house, wherever you may be in Northwest Alabama tonight.
All right, Alicia Smith reporting from our Shoals Bureau. Thanks. The storm also vented its bone-chilling fury on Tennessee.
Let's go back to Gary in 31 Storm Central. Gary?
Well, southern middle Tennessee certainly not spared the impact of the winter storm. In fact, at about the same time the Shoals was seeing the storm move in, much of southern middle Tennessee also seeing the same effects. The storm effects generally on a line from Fayetteville, Tennessee and Lincoln County westward, covering these counties here back into Giles, Lawrence County, on over toward Wayne County and also Hardin County here. The counties not affected by the storm, generally speaking, were east of Fayetteville, Tennessee, over toward Franklin, Marion, and Moore counties. However, in Tennessee, the ice, of course, was the biggest problem, much like it was over in the Shoals. The ice collecting on the power lines and the tree limbs, causing perhaps the largest problem. But at any rate, we were keeping a close eye on the storm as it moved into southern middle Tennessee as well.
All right, Gary, thanks. Well, residents in Tennessee will tell you of hardships after the ice storm of '94.
Thousands of trees down in southern Tennessee. Many residents are still without power. Cliff Hill has the latest live from southern Tennessee. Cliff, you were out in the ice storm last week. What's the current estimate on how many people lost their power?
Well, here in southern Tennessee, in Giles and Lincoln County alone, an estimated 19,000 people. Now, as you may know, this is a rural area. Both these counties, 19,000 people lost their power. Here in Lincoln County, 7,000 people lost their power in this dangerously cold conditions, that ice storm that we're talking about in this special report. And at times, utility crews here had to do double duty. Utility crews can't turn the power on until they fix the cause of the problem. The cause is apparent. Frozen tree limbs fell on power lines. The problem is so widespread, power may be off through the night and into tomorrow.
We got crews everywhere working. With the way the temperature is dropping, it's going to be a while.
Even a break in the tree trimming wasn't wasted. During downtimes, crew members checked on neighbors to make sure they were okay. This is Lanier Gray's front yard. His trees will have to be removed.
How do you get through something like this? You just have to live it out and work it out, I guess, is the only thing I know. You just have to wait around, it's all over with.
Yeah, you're going to have a job with your trees, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, we got a big job.
And that was the scene last week, just 6 days ago here in Lincoln County. In just a moment, I'll give you an update on how many folks still do not have their power. But Giles County was extremely hard hit. At one time, about 10,000 people had lost their power in Giles County. It was an extremely hard hit area with people coming in, utility crews coming in from Georgia and Huntsville utilities and across the state to help out there. Rob Ballard ventured out and has this update on what took place 6 days ago and where things lie tonight.
Storm hit Giles County. 10,000 customers out of 12,000 lost their power.
It started about
8:30 last night when I got home. And you could just walk out and hear the tree limbs falling and watch the power lines fall. The Giles County electric system immediately went into action to try and help cold-weary residents. Within a couple days, other crews from throughout the area would join in the fight. The major problem facing the utility crews was getting to the rural customers and dealing with many down power lines and tree limbs.
Well, it's been awful cold, sir. It's been awful cold, been mighty cold, but I know the power company is doing all they can do to restore its power back to the people, the ones that don't have it. But yet and still, it's been a rough way to go.
Rob Ballard, 31 News, Giles County.
Tonight, 350 people are without power in Giles County. The utility tells me that they are in rural areas where tree damage has done damage to the homes, making it almost impossible to get the power up until the homeowner fixes the problem, him or herself. Also, the labor costs $250,000 in Giles County, and equipment costs are running at $50,000. That's so far, and we're still less than a week into the recovery period after this ice storm. Now, back in Lincoln County, 200 people are without power tonight. The utility crew is working late tonight to get them hooked up. And outside, there's a lot of damage. Chainsaws are the busy thing here, as Alicia told us, in the shoals. As you can see, that's what they have to do. They've got to get these damaged trees away from the line so that utility crews can get inside and get things fixed up around those utility poles and those down power lines. Chainsaws are heard everywhere in Lincoln County. Back here, last week we brought you a live report with Debbie Duvall and her family and how they were going to deal with the ice storm of 1994. Let's take a look at what she had to say then. And joining me right now is one of the residents who's without power, has been without power all day and now into the night is Debbie Duvall. Debbie, thanks for joining us and getting out in this really cold weather. Tell me, how are y'all going to make it tonight?
Well, we have some candles and our kerosene lanterns, and thank goodness we have a wood-burning stove, I guess, because our furnace isn't working.
Yes, Debbie, we know about the wood-burning stove. They invited us in, so how are you going to keep the kids busy tonight without the power?
Oh, I guess we're going to have to play games and card games and Monopoly, and just anything to keep them in the same room so they can deal without TV.
Now, okay. All right, since we were one of the first to give you that type of interview with the families having to deal with that, we wanted to come back and find out how they, in fact, did make it through that night with the children, no power, no TV. And Debbie Duvall joins us now with her extended family. Debbie, how did y'all make it through the night?
Well, we got candles. I went to Walmart and I bought the last propane lantern. We watched TV on a battery-operated TV the second night, but the first night we went to bed real early, about 8 o'clock. Friday, since I didn't know when I was going to get power, I went ahead and bought some dry ice for my freezer because everything was going to go bad. I was afraid before the power came back on.
Now, Debbie, I understand that you got the power on Saturday night. I want to talk to Ryan right here. Ryan, how did you make it through the storm?
Well,
Well, was it fun? I guess it was a little, it was nice to camp out a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Mom, how did you make it?
Oh, we did fine. We all slept together in the living room and kept warm with kerosene heater and went to bed real early. There wasn't much arguing.
Okay. Everybody seems to have made it pretty good through that, and everyone's going back to school right now. Debbie and your family, thank you very much for joining us. So a success story, a happy story, a happy ending story to this report that a lot of families made it through A-OK. Back to y'all.
All right, Cliff, our best to the Duvall family.
I'll pass it along.
Thanks. Well, Limestone County was the next to feel the storm's wrath.
Gary's in 31 Storm Central to look at that leg of the storm's trick. Gary?
Well, as we mentioned just a minute ago, Fayetteville in Tennessee seemed to be the border area there of the ice accumulating to Fayetteville and not going much further eastward. Well, in North Alabama, Athens seemed to be the area where the ice storm came to a stop and the rain continued for the rest of North Alabama. But even in the city of Athens, we can break it down into the northwest and the western part of the city, seeing the brunt of the ice storm. The east and the southeastern part of the city apparently not suffering as severe result of the ice across the area. We were watching and talking to several people over in the Athens and Limestone County area as the storm was approaching and trying to figure out exactly, down to the street, where the ice was accumulating the most and where it seemed like it wasn't accumulating all that much. And in fact, we were able to draw that line exactly from northeast to southwest through just about the middle of the city of Athens. And of course, they had numerous problems over there in Limestone County, particularly from that point north and westward. And that line extended, it seemed, straight down from Fayetteville, Tennessee, through Athens, and then finally on down into parts of Lawrence County, down to the southwest. The southeastern part of the city apparently spared the brunt of that storm. Well, Limestone County is our next stop this evening. Heather, Don?
In Limestone County, Gary, tonight there are still at least 200 families who are taking cold showers. Probably some of them are sleeping together like the Duvals did.
Yeah.
And there are also a lot of people that just can't turn on their lights.
I remember ice storms in the past, too. It's an ordeal. Folks in the hardest hit areas there, Salem, Good Springs, Elkmont, Ardmore, generally northwest Limestone County. Liz Hurley is at the Limestone County Command Post, EMA headquarters. Liz, the problems in Limestone County are similar to other places, but there were some surprises for Limestone emergency personnel.
Heather, some pleasant surprises, I might add. With tree limbs scattered everywhere, you know, the National Guard was called in here. Shelter opened immediately to help those who did not have power. Surprise, though, only 9 people actually showed up at the shelter. So when it was open on Thursday, it closed on Friday. Also, the National Guard was sent over to Lauderdale County on Sunday after just 3 days because Limestone County was so organized. They were able, really, to pretty much take care of their own. Spencer Black, who is director of the Limestone County Emergency Management Agency, joins me. Spencer, kudos. You all really did kind of help yourself in this disaster.
Well, we had a lot of volunteers to call and say that they'd be glad to come and help us, but we have a lot of rural fire departments, rescue squads, EMA volunteers that we utilized them in the areas that we needed and pretty well helped our own self.
Now tell me, you've been out assessing homes today. What have you found?
Well, basically, we hadn't found any homes that has a lot of damage. I mean, that's not saying that they're not out there. And if they are, we wish the people would call us. But they got to be homes that are uninsured, homes that need some assistance, individual assistance.
So what does that say as far as getting some FEMA monies in?
Well, it's slim, which we have give assistance through Red Cross to, you know, several families, you know, helping them with foods that, you know, where their freezers is thawed and so forth, but individual assistance from FEMA looks slim.
Looks slim. Okay. Dan Williams also joins me. He is the mayor of the city of Athens. Let me ask you something, Dan, real quick. You all have had a communications problem with your residents. What are you going to do about that?
Well, that's one of the things we're going to try to address in our assessment of this whole situation after it's over. I'm going to try within the next day or 2 days to talk with some people from TVA about some suggestions they may have, some possibilities that they would have that we could inform masses of people rather than trying to do it on telephone lines and call-ins and things like that.
Now tell me very quickly, what about the 200 to perhaps even 300 people who are still without power? When will you get power restored to them?
Most of those within the city of Athens are individual houses, transformers, or problems with their own electrical hookups there. We have crews working now. We'll have about 22 to 25 crews working tomorrow. We're going to try to get those cleaned up within the city, and also we're working in the county. The north section where the hills and the hollows going into Tennessee occur is going to be the roughest part because there are fewer customers on longer lines and more remote distance.
So it could be up to how long?
Well, I would say after Friday afternoon, we hope to have everyone on, but there's going to be a possibility of some still out, and those are the people that we've got to maintain contact with to make sure they're okay.
Very good. Thank you very much. So it could be up to perhaps Friday, even a little bit longer, Don and Heather, before power is actually restored to the northwest area. One thing, too, if you live in the city of Athens or Limestone County or looking out over the city tonight, over the hospital, for instance, that is a controlled burn done by the city of Athens, approved by ADEM to burn some of the debris that's going on. You will see pretty big blazes, a lot of smoke out there, so don't be concerned.
All right, thanks, Liz. And Athens was, as we were making our calls that night, one of the first areas to get the information out about the shelters opening up and road closing, so they did a good job communicating. They were prepared. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Liz. Well, let's go back to 31 Storm Central. Gary, at what point did we go from an ice storm to a flood?
Well, Don, actually, the day of the ice storm, that afternoon, I was sitting right in this very seat, and we were watching a low-pressure system in the Gulf of Mexico. We told you the night before that now most areas in the valley would see at least 2 inches of rain, and well, that was an understatement. At the National Weather Service office, for example, the storm total was about 6 inches, a little bit above 6 inches of total rainfall. But what happened was, as that low pressure moved along the front, the wind shifted from the northeast to the southeast. and that actually brought rising temperatures that night. And that was good news. It changed the freezing rain to just plain old cold rain. The bad news was that we saw some very heavy rainfall and some thunderstorms and flooding reported as a result. Don, Heather?
Yes, even as ice was still forming over West Alabama, as you say, Gary, creeks and rivers in the northeastern part of the state were starting to overflow their banks.
Long before any of the roads were underwater, Kim Albright was closely watching the road conditions. Kim, where did you first see evidence of the flooding?
Well, Don, Heather, I had been in Athens covering the icing problems over there and all of the power outages when we got word that some of the creeks had started to overflow, and already street flooding was a problem across much of the area. As I traveled around Limestone County, I found creeks starting to overflow. This creek along Highway 72 was the first evidence of what was to come. As the afternoon turned to evening, I continued providing live reports from the problem areas. Law enforcement officers renewed their pleas for motorists to stay at home and off the roads as conditions worsened. By nightfall, small creeks had turned into raging torrents, and many roads were blocked by high water. Al Whitaker and I teamed up for live coverage as a motorist became stranded in high water on Thompson Road in Morgan County. Throughout the night, water continued to rise, and by daybreak, rural residents were finding it difficult, if not impossible, to travel. This was the scene on Jordan Road at Homer Nance in my first live traffic report at 6 a.m. Several feet of water covered the road. Even Highway 72 in Gurley was partially submerged. Despite warnings not to cross high water, motorists, determined to face danger, tried anyway. Some made it, others did not. Even before the rain stopped, damage caused by the heavy rain and high water was evident. Potholes developed at an alarming rate, and repair crews hit the road while the rain continued to fall. When the water receded, it left behind damage that forced some roads to remain closed. As I reported to you live Monday morning at 6 a.m., Brownsboro Road was closed because of damage to a bridge. Floodwaters ate away asphalt on the bridge approach. Workers immediately began repairs, and the bridge was reopened Thursday morning. Continued throughout the past few days, and it's pretty much complete now, but the cost of those repairs is still being assessed. Tillman Hill, County Commission District 1 in Madison County, estimates that with all of the hard freeze combined with the flooding that we've had over the last week, road damage could top $150,000 just in his district. And of course, other damages are still being assessed. But right now, drainage is of top priority in many areas. Today, work crews were working on Charlie Patterson Road, installing a new drainage pipe there. And work will continue. Now, pothole repair is continuing on a daily basis. And Don, Heather, I will continue to report on road problems each morning on 31 News Morning or anytime conditions warrant right here on 31 News.
All right, thanks, Cam. And boy, those potholes really cropped up after this thing, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the least of our worries. A vital warning to all our viewers facing major repair problems.
Stay with us. We'll have that coming up next on your only 24-hour news and weather source.
Sports get you closer to the action than anybody. Hello, everybody. I'm Gus Hergert. Join us all this week live as we take you to the Super Bowl of NASCAR, the Daytona 500.
Only one station goes to Daytona and brings you the inside stories. Watch tonight at 10. Plus, we continue the series that everybody's talking about, 50 Ways to Keep Your Lover. Tonight, you'll see why people cheat and how to keep them from doing it. Tonight at 10 on 31 News. More news, more often.
Well, the storm could deliver a 1-2 punch to consumers and homeowners.
After the damage to their homes, some residents could become the victims of price gouging from some unscrupulous people. Kirk Chason is in our newsroom with that story. Kirk, what can residents do and be on the lookout for?
Well, Don, first they need to keep in mind that most local businesses are likely to be honest, but in emergency situations, those businesses can be busy around the clock, and that leaves the opening for con men. One thing to look for is out-of-state license tags on the repairman's car or truck. Get identification from the repairman and make sure he is licensed to do business. You can find that out by calling the city hall where the repairman is from. Now, you also don't have to pay for work if someone just shows up and starts cleaning debris from your yard without getting an agreement from you first. There have also been some cases of people disguising themselves as utility workers. They ask for money up front to hook up your electricity. They get the money, play around with some wires, and then leave the home without any power.
Kirk, what about price gouging?
Well, that is when a company charges more than 20% during an emergency above what they would charge during a normal situation. There have been a couple of isolated cases of that. It is a little bit difficult to prove the difference in price, but if you suspect you may have been price gouged, you can report that to the Better Business Bureau.
All right, Kirk Chason reporting from our newsroom. Let's go back now to Gary in 31 Storm Central. Gary, we're now on a fast track for spring, or should we stay alert for a repeat performance of winter?
Well, Heather, for the time being, we're heading for a spring-like warm-up across the Tennessee Valley, but you remember last March, we had a paralyzing snowstorm, so we've got a few more weeks that we're going to have to keep a close eye on potential winter weather ahead. But this ice storm, as bad as it was, could have been a lot worse if we had had colder weather just prior to this particular event. So let's count our lucky stars, at least the ones that we can count.
And not count our chickens before they're hatched, thinking that spring is already here for good. Well, the Tennessee Valley has just come through one of its toughest times.
We've been there before. The killer tornadoes of 1974 and 89, the 85 ice storm, the 87 and 93 snowstorms, and now the winter storm of 94.
In each tragedy, we've witnessed the great strength and courage of the people of the Tennessee Valley, the business people, rescue workers, and community leaders.
So as we pause to remember this latest disaster, we also want to acknowledge the spirit of survival here in the Tennessee Valley.
So thank you for joining us for this very special edition of 31 News, our special report.
Remember, you can rely on 31 News 24 hours a day to be the first to bring you news and weather information when you need it most.
We'll be back with more news at the top of the hour, and join us for a complete wrap of the day's events on 31 News at 10. Have a good night.
When we were told that we were going to get